Hello and welcome, live and direct from my basement here in lovely Winnipeg, Manitoba. My name is Jonathan Lay. I am the training director at New Media Manitoba, and I'm so happy that you could all take a little bit of time out of your evening to join us tonight. We are very happy to partner with Film Training Manitoba to present virtual production with HaZ Dulull. We are really excited here at New Media Manitoba about the way that the game industry and the film industry are starting to intersect in some exciting ways. And we really think that presentations with industry leaders like HaZ are vital to our community. I think that they really illuminate what is possible with the right mix of creativity, technical know-how, and determination. I feel like these sort of talks can inspire us, create connections, and showcase the amazing caliber of talent that we have in the city. An example of this local talent is a great team that I've recently gotten to know, Copilot Collective. Yeah, it's a nice moody shot of the boys at Copilot. So Copilot is a Winnipeg-based film production company that specializes in virtual production. The team at Copilot Co. Aims to bridge the gap between Manitoba's booming technology and film industries. Austin and Reed from Copilot are going to join us at the end of the presentation for the question and answer portion. Without further ado, here is HaZ Dulull talking all things virtual production.
Hi everyone, my name's HaZ Dulull and I'm a filmmaker. I'm super excited to be here today to talk to you at the New Media Manitoba event, where I'm going to share my experience and journey starting from video games to filmmaking right through to where I am today, where I'm directing and producing animated feature films and virtual production. So just like with every journey, let's start from the beginning. I started my career in video games doing game cinematics, you know, the stuff that says in small print, not game footage. And as you can see, I've worked on PC games to early PlayStation titles right through to GameCube. Boy, that really shows my age. Okay, several years later, I decided to make the move into visual effects and decided to start as a compositor, where I was responsible for seamlessly combining CG elements into live action footage. And that actually taught me a lot about cinematography and what makes a shot work creatively and technically in photographic terms. I then moved from compositing to doing post-viz on a movie called The Dark Knight. And so doing post-viz taught me a lot about cinematography, shot composition, camera blocking, pacing, and just general good visual storytelling. And then from there, I moved up to VFX supervisor and VFX producer, where I spent a lot of time with filmmakers, studio executives, and producers, just figuring out how to achieve a shot creatively and technically on the budget and schedule available. You know, I actually learned a lot about problem solving on the set and in the studio, and often coming up with solutions in last minute problems or challenges. So whilst working in VFX, in my spare time, yeah right, as if we had spare time working in visual effects, but whatever time I could grab in the evenings or weekends, I was making short films, because my end goal was always to be a filmmaker, but I didn't go to film school. Instead, I just chose the VFX route to get into filmmaking, mainly because of the types of movies I loved and the genres I aspired to make films in. So I made a bunch of short films, all financed by myself with some technology sponsorship and a whole lot of coffee and support from friends. All of my short films were sci-fi driven, and the ones that really took off was Project Kronos and Sync. Both landed me a manager and got me a foot into the door of Hollywood. Now, all of this eventually led me to producing and directing my debut feature film, The Beyond, which then led to my second feature film, 2036 Origin Unknown, starring Katie Sackhoff from Battlestar Galactica, and you most recently may have seen her in a Netflix show called Another Life. Now, Origin Unknown scored me a gig to direct a pilot and a bunch of episodes on Disney's action comedy, Fast Lane. Okay, let me show you what these projects are via my show reel.
I said stay live.
This is life.
And this unprecedented mix of human consciousness and technology.
I would suggest that this is the beginning of the future of astronauts to come.
I see it! Excuse me, truck! Over there! Coming through! On your left! Ah! Now on your right! Fuck off!
So after a crazy good year of 2018, 2019 was a year of just development of next projects, and I decided to look into doing some previs while the scripts were in development, and one of the feature films of mine was Luna. Now, I'd done Previs before in my recent projects, and I found it to be very useful for blocking out the shots and designing the sequences, but I often needed help from a studio or hire a bunch of artists, animators, plus let's not forget the licensing of software like Autodesk Maya. So I had to find a smart and affordable way to do some Previs, a way I could just do it myself, on my laptop, and I decided to download Unreal Engine 4.22, and I pretty much picked it up over a weekend. And as you can see, I was blocking out scenes, designing sequences, and cinematography all in a virtual set that looked visually engaging, and I actually almost forgot it was Previs. Now, as a hands-on director, I was able to use mocap data I downloaded from Adobe Mixamo to get my characters moving, and even have particles, dynamic lighting all in real time. I even brought on a CG artist just for a couple of days just to do some updates on the astronaut and moon landscape assets. And that was it really. So I quickly realized that the Previs could end up being a pitch viz instead, because now I was not just blocking out shots, but I was setting the mood and the tone with lighting, particles, cinematography, animation. To be honest, it started to look like a proof of concept, and I was doing all of this in real time. So here's the pitch viz I ended up creating, which was used to attract financing, sales, and casting for the film. So after getting some really good reactions from the pitch viz, I had a light bulb moment. And that was, if we can do this in real time, why don't we put a little more love in this and create actual finished content this way? So I had the challenge of making that a reality. And it must have been fate or something, but during that time I got an email from a comic book company asking to speak to me about producing and directing a proof of concept for one of their graphic novel IP, which they were developing into a TV series. So I took this opportunity to pitch them the idea of doing this in animation, specifically using real-time CGI approach as opposed to the traditional CG approach, which would have required a lot of funding, which they actually didn't have a lot of for this 12-minute proof of concept episode called Battlesuit. But the problem I had faced with that pitch was that they all had the impression that animation was super expensive and would require a huge team and studio. So just to reassure them, I decided to do a quick CG test myself inside of Unreal Engine, using free Paragon game assets from the Epic Marketplace. Now, this was not only just to set the client expectation of the quality and the animation style they were going to be getting, but also more for me to see how far I could push it with real-time animation on that budget and timescale. So here is a quick test sequence that I did. So after they saw that test, not only were they impressed that I was able to pull it off in Unreal Engine in just a few days by myself on a laptop, but they were really confident to just let me go off and produce the pilot episode.
I could spend my entire career analyzing just one planet, looking at one species, without ever knowing for sure if I got their history right.
I'm out! Watch your back! My leg! My leg! Are you here to replace us?
Here to replace you? No. We couldn't do what we do without you.
Okay, so the production of Battlesuit was a team of 3, with me being a hands-on director creating all the shots, animating and editing, and a bunch of other things I was doing. We also had Andrea Tedeschi, who had been working with me on all my projects before, and he was responsible for setting up the environments and doing the main bulk of the asset build. And last but not least, we had Ronan Aitan, who was in charge of setting up the technical pipeline of the project and utilizing a cool facial capture and animation workflow he had developed for Unreal Engine. Now, I must stress that all 3 of us were embarking on a challenge because, let's face it, this was our first actual production being done inside of Unreal Engine. Phew, no pressure there. One of the first things we looked into was an animation workflow, mainly because we just couldn't afford to hire really good actual character animators on this project, and there was definitely no budget for motion capture sessions, so we relied a lot on Adobe Mixamo animation libraries, as well as several motion capture data packs that we purchased from the Epic Marketplace. I would then retarget these onto our main characters and then use motion mixing in Unreal Engine's sequencer to create the desired action I was after. It was kind of like editing, but with animation files blending from one action to another, all in real time. The next component to the animation workflow was the facial performance side of things, and we wanted to find also a way of automating this. So we utilized the iPad AR kit, which will be live linked into Unreal Engine. We can now quickly put in performances on our characters very early on in this process. We hired our lead actress Kosha Engler to come in for one day only to do voice performance recording, but at the same time we were also capturing her facial performance on one of the iPads. And because this was all in real time, the actress can see how her performance is actually looking on the character, and then she can adjust her performance accordingly. The other iPad was capturing just video reference of her face, which was very useful for us later on, as it allowed us to see what nuances the iPad didn't capture, and therefore we would need to put that in manually. Because the capture is all data, we can manipulate pretty much anything in that capture using Unreal Engine to tweak and enhance things further. When it came to putting the scenes together inside Unreal Engine, I took a more kit bashing approach, which reminded me a lot of when I was a kid creating really cool things with Lego. So we purchased a bunch of sci-fi kits from the marketplace, and Andrea would also create a bunch of assets which I could then cobble together to create the final results. Things like spaceships and space stations and all of that really cool things that pretty much, that's how models are put together back in the day when they were doing miniatures. I kind of applied the same technique with CG. Now the big component with the environment builds was the use of Quixel Bridge, which allowed me to go in and pick elements I wanted to add in the environment and then export that directly into my Unreal Engine scene, so I can literally paint things like sand, rock, dirt tracks, etc. on the landscape. This was a game changer for me as a director, because previously I would be usually giving notes to the artist to tweak this and that, but now I can just do those tweaks myself and just leave the artist to focus on the bigger things which I can't do myself physically. Not only is this efficient and a massive time saver, it's also so much more fun as a director to be able to go in and physically tweak things and throw more stuff at it. As I was blocking my camera moves, it felt like I was on a real set. The only difference is the more stuff I throw at it isn't going to impact the schedule or budget, or use up any resources like artist time. So me giving director sign-offs and approvals and feedback to my team was extremely fast and, dare I say, real time. You know, the really cool thing about this way of working and creating worlds for animation, it's not that I'm able to do this hands-on. It's more to do with the fact that I'm actually working in an environment with actual lighting, shading on, and also with ray tracing real-time rendering being active for things like reflections and shadows. So it's literally what I see is what I get. And that's a big paradigm shift when you're comparing it to various steps you would need to take in a traditional CG animation before even seeing results like this. For the action sequences, I really wanted a handheld visceral style to it, you know, like in Saving Private Ryan or Black Hawk Down. So I didn't want to use like gizmos or plugins, you know, things that simulate handheld but 2D. So I wanted it to feel like someone was actually in the war zone with a camera. But also, I kind of missed being on location traditionally when I was doing live action. So to combat that feeling of missing out, I made good use of my iPad supporting AR kit and the Unreal Engine plugin called Dragonfly. So now I had a lightweight wireless virtual camera, easy to operate with the Game Vice controllers that I attached to the side of the iPad, and without the need of huge studio space or teams to set up and operate. This actually worked really well with the hands-on approach I take to directing, where I can just drive the camera, have creative control on framing, lens choices, focus pulling, pacing, visual storytelling, all of this in real time, but also treat it like a real-world camera and review my takes and shots instantly. This really made me treat the Warzone environment scene in Unreal Engine as if it was a real film location. To really push the concept of doing this entire project inside Unreal Engine, I even created the title sequence as part of the opening scene of the film, which is not only a time saver, but also allowed me to be creative with how I present the titles in a 3D environment with ray tracing graphics all in real time. And hey, let's not stop there. I even did the screen UI graphics entirely inside Unreal Engine, using simple shapes keyframed in time with the character's hand gestures all in sequencer. Alright, so here's another example of how liberating real-time filmmaking is for me, and allowing me to be 100% hands-on with every single shot. No, I'm not a control freak, but you know, I do like the idea of being able to move things like the lighting and to adjust the scenes to get the mood and the tone I'm after. And also animating, designing shots and camera moves that are creatively insane and exactly as I imagine them to be, and then push it further when I'm animating in the scenes. To be able to use Unreal Engine sequencer like a composer orchestrating means I'm in total control of each shot, and I'm not relying on others to move the camera, trigger off key events like explosions, or to change a sequence direction into something else. I'm in full control with this, meaning I can really focus on telling the story the best possible way, but also just not be afraid to explore and experiment with ideas. I know I keep going on about this, but I'm just literally blown away with the fact that I can move around my virtual set and find the shots in real time, with things like particles of smoke, explosion, fire, detailed assets, animated giant robots, atmospheric fog, as I explore and find the perfect frame to tell my story, without any waiting time for things like rendering or processing, because this is all on the fly thanks to Nvidia's GPU power. All of this means that the approach we took with Battlesuit is truly final pixel renders, meaning we only captured QuickTime videos of what our camera was seeing in the real-time viewport, and then slot that into the edit using DaVinci Resolve. In fact, the only post-production done was editing, color grading, and sound. By the time we had finished the project and it was released, we had really learnt so much. But also, the project was successful in terms of it was widely received and got coverage on movie sites, as well as being part of Razor's Made in Blade campaign. All of this opened the doors for me as a filmmaker, now telling stories in the world of animation. And very soon, we found our next project, which was to take it further, to embark on producing an animated feature film entirely in Unreal Engine. The feature film is based on a popular video game called Mutant Year Zero from the publisher Funcom, whom the producers, Pathfinder Media, have a good relationship with and manages the game IP. We spent around 3 to 4 months putting together early production footage, and the feature film was actually recently announced officially on IGN. So here is the 3.5 minute production sizzle with the early footage we released as part of the announcement.
The Ark is humanity's last outpost. Within these walls, we help each other create a new civilization with the guidance of our leader, the Elder. He relies on stalkers, adventurers who leave the Ark, explore the zone, and scavenge for precious resources. Stalkers have to be more than human. That's me, Mr. More Than Human, aka a mutant. I look weird to you, but hey, you look weird to me. Our mission, he says, is a man, and that man is Hammond.
Hammond was a strange one. He thought he could find answers to life in the zone.
Find Hammond and bring him back alive.
Finally, there's a way out of this crazy city.
Sign us up for a suicide mission, Mr. Elder. This is insane. Your boy Hammond better be worth it.
The fate of the Ark depends on it.
You get to die. I have to live for all eternity.
Oh, fantastic.
I see stalkers! Get the fat one!
Did you forget there's like a gajillion ghouls out here who want to kill us?
Any of them ever look like us? Like mutants?
It doesn't seem the slightest bit strange to you that both of us can't remember our past.
Guess that's typical for mutants like us.
Finding out who we are sounds like the quest of a lifetime.
If Hammond thinks there's an Eden, there's an Eden. Believe me. And we can work together.
Seriously?
Well, hello.
Heads up.
Let's get to it. Come on!
Hiya, boys!
Give me a freaking break.
No, please stop. Are you in need of a funeral director? Bye-bye.
Not today! I'm taking you with me! Damn it! Gotcha. Damn it, I'm losing feathers here.
This shit gives me heartburn.
A big whoop. I got the feathers pulled out of me.
Shut the duck up and keep moving.
You know, I ask myself, ducks, why are you out here?
So annoying.
Okay, so I can tell you that was super fun making that. So let me share with you how that footage was created. But firstly, we knew that every day you're only as good as your last show, meaning we had to make our next project better and bigger. We learnt so much on Battlesuit. You know, I knew we had to improve on the rough edges since we're now making a feature film. When we started this project, version 4.25 of Unreal Engine was released, and there was a ton of new features in there. Plus, also, I upgraded to using an NVIDIA Quadro RTX 6000 graphics card inside an eGPU chassis unit, as opposed to what we did on Battlesuit, which was I used a Quadro RTX 5000 in my laptop. Hence the speed with everything on lit mode. That allowed us to create even bigger and complex sets with lots of effects and animated characters and assets live in real time, whilst I was able to explore around the environments to find my shots. As you can see, I'm still using the same technique with motion mixing animation in the sequencer just to get the performance I want with the characters. Now, action's a big trademark of mine in all of my projects, and Mutant Year Zero is going to push action much further. I wanted to take that single one camera take concept, you know, the ones that you see in movies like Gravity or 1917, and push it to some insane heights to elevate the edge of the seat thrills. Now, this particular camera move was actually a last minute thought I had when I was moving the camera around to frame up the action. I think I must have accidentally keyframed one of the positions too low on the ground, so when I was scrubbing back and forth, I noticed it and thought, actually, that's a cool shot. So again, thanks to the power of real time, I'm able to find these accident moments and just turn them into cool ideas. Then to really push it, I timed each vehicle action like a dance, so the choreography was all managed inside Unreal Engine Sequencer, and the action shot became this 570 frame single take action, where I was able to tweak each element on the fly, from the car spinning to the spaceship zipping by to the characters, sliding across the road to the explosions. I was doing all of this as I was scrubbing through the scene, again not waiting for any processing or rendering to be done. In this project, I utilized ray tracing not just to create a cool cinematic look, but also for direction and story purposes. So let's look at this real-time shot, for example. You can see that I'm using it to reveal the aftermath of a chaos that's just happened as we move across the street towards the water puddle, just to build up anticipation with a reveal via the reflection, before panning up to ultimately show the audience there's literally hundreds of these killer drones. One of the things we did in this project, in order to push it to another level with quality and production value, was adding real physics to the objects. So things like wind causing a newspaper page to move as we provide plot points to the story for the audience makes the scene feel more alive. The same thing with the character's cloak, which creates this sense of mystery about him, but also elevates the cinematic nature of the scene. It's one of those things, like if you don't have the physics cloak, then the scene feels a little flat and dead. But with this, it feels right and kind of provides this high-level nature to the animation. So if we break down all of my experiences that I've showed you so far on my career as a filmmaker, even right back to starting with my video games experience, to visual effects experience, and to directing live action, and then to animation using Unreal Engine, all of those experiences all add up to where we are today, especially with the projects where I'm using virtual production. So virtual production is essentially the convergence of CGI with live action, and good virtual production marry the two together seamlessly. So in the case of virtual production of what I'm going to show you now, that is using LED screens to display CGI backgrounds, environments, synchronized with a real-world camera that is in live action. So here's an example of a project I did last year called Percival, where we got to utilize the latest in LED virtual production technology. Okay, so that project was shot last year, October 2020, over at Rebellion Film and Television Studios in the UK. And as you can see in the behind the scenes footage, not only was it super fun to work on, everyone on the crew, our very small crew, was respectful in terms of the COVID protocols and keeping it safe to work in. But also, we were all first-time users of virtual production. So there's Eben Balter there, my cinematographer who's worked on HBO's Avenue 5, myself directing it. We got a production designer, we've got the camera team, we've got the virtual production team, behind the computers operating, making sure the Unreal Engine scenes are working fine. We've got the team over at Disguise, we've got the NCAM tracking team. So we've got like a nice small army, everyone working, collaborating together basically to all work in synchronicity. But the big thing I want to point out, if you notice in the behind the scene footage you're seeing here, is it's not just the point of having great LED screens with gorgeous Unreal Engine CG environments. This works because we have a good blend of real world elements, such as we're having to build the ground, we're having to build, bring in foliage, tree trunks. All of that helps blend with the background. It also gives the actors a sense of like they are in the environment and not just referring to a screen behind them. The other thing you may have noticed also is the lack of actual lighting hardware we have. Usually you have big massive LED lights. In this case, we've got two tiny sort of like panel lights, for to help light the skin tones when he takes off his helmet. And I would say 90% of the lighting is done via the LED screens, because those LED screens are so powerful with the lighting. And if you get the color temperature correct with your Unreal Engine scene and your cinematographer, you can get some pretty good lighting and seamless photographic lighting all in camera. One advantage of using Unreal Engine and having knowledge of Unreal Engine like I've showed in my previous projects is that during pre-production, we were able to just dive into Unreal with the actual CG environments that we're going to use on the actual LED screens. We're able to use early versions of those environments work in progress to start blocking out the shots and trying shot ideas out, pretty much doing previs. That came in extremely useful for myself, the cinematographer, production designers, pretty much anyone involved in the project. Nothing got wasted because, as with previs, as you know, usually previs is low res objects, right? But this is the actual environments that we had to build anyway for the LED screens. So it became useful and multi-purpose, which is very, very efficient in virtual production. One of the things we did on the shoot was take a very indie filmmaking approach, which is think outside the box when trying to achieve certain things. One of the things we wanted to achieve was atmosphere. And we knew that, we couldn't just rely on visual effects to do that. So we flooded the stage a little bit with atmospheric smoke. Now, I have to admit, at first we're a bit hesitant, thinking, well, what's that going to be like, against an LED screen? But it actually worked out really well, as you can see in this footage. But also, one of the things we did was we wanted a God ray effect. One of the things we did was we removed the tile from one of the LED panels, because as you know, the LED screens are built up of tiles, right? So we removed that top one there, and we shove a big HMI light behind it, and there you go, voila, you have a God ray effect with the smoke and the lighting and the Unreal Engine scenes all just working seamlessly to create that amazing shot, which feels 3D. We can move the camera where we want, and the actors actually had great interaction with the smoke, but also the light shone onto the actor's face, which you couldn't do in visual effects very well. So that's another good example of just thinking outside the box, be bold and be brave when you're using this technology, and not just try to be safe in convention, i.e. sticking a guy in front of a screen. Okay, so now let's talk about all the people that's involved in making a virtual production shoot. Now, we obviously had a small team and a limited stage size, but regardless of the size of the TV or film show, this is what a typical call sheet would look like for a crew list. You would have your standard crew list, which is your director, producer, first AD, DP, you have your ACs, your DITs, your grips, and so on, your art department. But you also have your screen and virtual production crew, which is going to be a new thing that's going to be added in line item budgets for most shoots going forward, where you will have your virtual production HOD, so the person responsible for like organizing the screen rentals and so on. You have your screen operator, VP, the virtual production lighting, You also have your VP supervisor. You have screen text. You have Unreal playback. You have the tracking, whether it's NCAM or whatever tracking system you're using. You have electrical assistants. You also have Unreal Engine artists. So that is quite a big team. That is not your typical digital village. That is a production team. So one of the things producers that are budgeting for VP shows will have to start thinking about is, allocating budgets for that side of the crew to be on set. This is not the same as having a visual effects supervisor on set. This is a production crew that is working hand in hand with your live action production crew. So this all now rounds up to where I am today, 2021, where I am currently deep in production on my third feature film, which is this time an animated feature film, still in the sci-fi action genre space, but using all of the skill sets I've learned, from even using video games and filmmaking experience of live action, right through to the Unreal Engine animated projects I've done, and now the virtual production. All of those skill sets have actually allowed me to get to the point where I can comfortably go in and produce and direct a high concept sci-fi feature that utilizes virtual production and animation in Unreal Engine. So I'm hoping this whole presentation has motivated you, or at least inspired you, or you've had some nuggets of information that's useful for your own projects. And you can also follow my progress on all of my projects, especially this one that I'm in production at the moment. You can follow that on Instagram, my Twitter, or even on LinkedIn. So now I guess I've got like 15 and 20 minutes to take some questions from you guys. Thank you.
Hello. Hey, HaZ, how's it going?
Hey guys.
Yeah, that was an incredible presentation. The short film out of control.
Yeah, basically we had questions written down, and as we were watching, you were just answering each one by one. So you made our job tough here.
Oh, thanks, man.
Yeah, it was fantastic. So first off, I just want to say hi to everyone. My name's Reed. This is Austin, and together we own Copilot Co. here in Winnipeg. We're based in Winnipeg, and we specialize in filmmaking and more recently in virtual production. So before jumping into the Q&A session, we just want to give a huge thank you to yourself, HaZ, for joining us today.
Pleasure.
Like we said, that presentation was fantastic, and it's really inspiring to see like-minded professionals and also professionals who have achieved success in this industry, especially in the world of virtual production right now.
Yeah, as a company that operates both in like the film industry and the tech world, and here in Winnipeg, it really is inspiring to see, like Reed said, like-minded professionals like yourself achieve success, and especially work in the world of virtual production. So with that being said, let's jump into some questions. For those in the audience that have questions, I know you kind of placed some in there, so we can kind of get to them. We'll get to them one by one. I think we'll start with one question, if you don't mind. So from both a creative and directorial standpoint, how has virtual production changed the way that you approach filmmaking as a whole, from concept to shooting to like the final pixels?
Wow, I mean, that's a big question to start off with. I mean, that's good. That's a really good question. I mean, I think the first thing we have to understand is what is virtual production? The term virtual production is actually, there isn't one set definition for virtual production. It's a very broad term, especially today. I think in a few years' time, we'll be able to hone it down. So, how it affects me is it really is down to two things. The story, obviously. What is the story? What is it I'm trying to get across before I even think about virtual production? And then you start to think, okay, what in virtual production am I going to use to tell my story? Am I making a fully animated film like Mutant Year Zero or my current feature? Then that's a level of virtual production because I'm using Unreal Engine, I'm using real-time graphics, I'm using an iPad on a VCam rig to shoot. That's an element of virtual production. Or are we talking about the blend between a live action scenario and CG backgrounds? And that's where we start looking at LED screens, okay? But then there's elements of involving augmented reality, right? If you want to put some AR in there or some MX or even things with holograms, I mean, we can go to town of this. So for me, how it's accelerated me as a filmmaker is I don't have to wait anymore, okay? That's the thing. Like, if I have an idea, I can just whip up Unreal Engine. Even if I don't have the budget to build assets, I can just download some assets from the marketplace, right? And start putting stuff together very, very quickly and essentially make a version of the movie on the computer, which is way better quality than Previs for starters, right? And then from there, I can go and then raise money or show people, but it's so much quicker than walking around with a script and say, hey, can you give me some money to make this script? Which is pretty much what happens when you go to LA or any place, right? So from a creative point of view, I have a lot more control, which means that I usually, as a director, you have to like work with big teams, which is great, but you have to wait, you have to give feedback, and then you have to wait for the results to come back. And then like a couple of days later, you're like, oh, that's not what I meant. I mean this. And you spend like up to like 1 or 2 weeks at least going backwards and forwards on emails or CineSync or Frame.io or whatever software you use, right? Whereas now I block out everything exactly the way I want to make it. Almost like making the movie, but on the computer. And that's signed off. And then I can just bring the amazing artists to come on and do the amazing characters, do the amazing environments. And if they want, they can take it further. But the point is, we're not going around in circles trying to figure it out because I've done the sign-off process. That has accelerated production massively. It's kind of made me much more attractive as a director because producers want to work with me and financiers are trusting me. They're like, well, he's going to get it done because, you know, if we're running out of time, I know he's going to figure this out, right? We don't have to like go and hire another team or another company. So that's helped massively.
Yeah, that's amazing. It really shows you how much it can shrink the process of kind of getting the project off the ground, huh?
And just creatively, you know, having something in your head and being able to show something visually.
Yeah, without having to need a crew or anything like that. Totally.
So I guess a question that I have before jumping into the chat section here would be, I know you spoke about this during your presentation, but let's say something like Percival, in terms of creating that sizzler that you showed us, what's the minimal amount of crew and what's kind of the essential crew members for a production like that?
Sure. I think the thing about Percival is we have to remember that was shot in 2 days, right? And we had 1 day recce. And also, none of us knew what we were doing, essentially, apart from the people from NCAM, and we had someone from Satori that dealt with the screens. But everyone else was like, let's just figure it out. I think the key people you need, obviously, you need a good virtual production supervisor. Like we were lucky, we had 2. We had one from Satori and one from Epic who just came on to help. Without anyone that knows virtual production in terms of like how to recalibrate those screens, how to set up the tracking, and believe me, things break. Things constantly break. Like on that shoot, my God, like I was trying to go pull Greengrass, like get the camera and whip it around or do a bit of Blair Witch. Yeah, it wasn't happening. Like the NCAM system kept breaking, and I'm like, oh, so I have to kind of like put my camera on a dolly or be safe. I can't go too handheld. And the virtual production supervisor was like, well, look, you can, but you just got to pick your moments. And just remember that every time your tracking breaks, you have to reset it. That means resetting the screens, resetting NCAM, which is the tracking software. It has to then recalibrate all of the you see those little dots you see, like those kind of like Dalmatian spots we call them? That's for the tracking. And that takes up to like 5 minutes. Now, 5 minutes as we're talking doesn't sound like a lot, but on a shoot, 5 minutes is when your first AD is like, whoa, time is ticking. And you do that like 6 times a day, you're eating in a lot of time. But also momentum for actors, you know, they get a bit like, oh, we shooting, and the whole crew. So definitely have a good virtual production supervisor. The big thing for me is if I could do it again, I would have more tech recce time. Like, because the thing about VP is you can't really, I don't want to say can't, but you can't really go in like with live action and try to find a shot and go, oh, let's shoot over here or let's shoot over there. There's an element of that where you can go to Unreal and change your environments. Like, for example, we had a reverse shot. Now, traditionally live action, you move the camera, you move your track, and you reset the dressing. This one, we just rotated the background. That was it. So that gives you, there's a flexibility there. But at the same time, you know, the big thing is the tech recce is super important because there's so many things that we thought when we did Previs and storyboarding and theoretically should have worked. When we turn up on the day, we're like, oh, we can't do that. For example, like I wanted like shots to track from the feet up to the knight's head. Well, quickly, the minute you start putting your shot down there, you start to see there's an edge between the screen and the floor. You're like, oh, we need to build more ground. So we're like, but the production design doesn't have any more budget to build the ground because we only built certain things like the trees and the rocks. So like, oh, so what do we do? So you just have to fudge it a bit. Yeah, there's another shot that, and again, you find a lot of this on tech recce. You know, like I wanted a shot where we're looking up. but we couldn't really angle the screens in a way, because obviously the screens are kind of placed. So what we ended up doing was kind of have the actor kind of like leaning back, and we adjust the Unreal Engine scenes in the background, so you kind of cheat it. Another thing also was, I'm a bit of a Michael Bay fan. You might have noticed in my Mutant Year Zero explosions. I wanted that kind of Michael Bay track around shot, like the having bad boys and all the films. And again, you're limited with the real estate you have on the screen, right? And also the space. We didn't have a full circular dolly. So what we did was, and again, we were just saying this as a joke during Tech Recce, but we were like, let's just try it. We actually had, original idea was to have someone on sort of like a pedal stool kind of turn around. So as he's turning around, we then rotate the background, the Unreal Engine background, to move one way, and the camera moves the other way to get this Michael Bay clockwork. And then we have the light on the top screen moving as well. It really worked. On the day, we end up not standing on the pedestal. He had to actually just end up doing this himself because it felt more realistic with the shoulders. Yeah. But these are things you will never figure out on the day because there's so much going on with the setup and the digital village and the virtual production, the timing, that the Tech Recce is the best place to do this. The other thing also is there's a bit of education required, I would say. Like if you're bringing on a cinematographer, your first AD, anyone on the crew, man, even the gaffer, every single person is still needed on a virtual production shoot. Like I always get these people like coming up on Facebook and, oh, we're out of a job. I'm like, no, you're not. We need art department. We need gaffers. We need all those people. The only thing is they need to be educated a bit. Like, the gaffers, the lighting team now has to like talk with the Unreal Engine artists, which is never happens. VFX artists never talk to the production crew, let alone be on the set. Now the VFX team is essentially on par with the production crew. They start at the same time and they finish at the same time. That's different, and that's a big part of the process in shooting on set. But definitely I would always advise get the best virtual production supervisor on set. That is a job that's going to become the most sought after job. If you look at all of the companies that are hiring, they're looking for virtual production supervisors. It's a big thing. Yeah.
Oh, that makes so much sense. That's crazy. It seems like, I like what you said about everyone being educated, because it seems like it's such a new world that's constantly changing that, like, people getting their first experience in a virtual production set should know the slightest bit about it and how to navigate it like a film set.
Totally.
We do have a question here from Maro, I believe. I hope I said your name right. The question is, what tools in Unreal Engine did you use, and how did they make your job doing all of this easier?
Okay. Well, I mean, Unreal Engine isn't it's not like Maya or to be hands-on. It's a sequencer tool. The sequencer tool is essentially my editorial timeline, and most directors have an editorial knowledge somehow, and I always cut my own stuff. And for me to be able to control the timing of the cameras, control the timing of the explosions, control the timing of when certain things come up, that is a game changer for me as a hands-on director, because now I'm not just being hands-on by operating the camera, I'm literally able to do as much as I physically can and collaborate with artists. That's huge. So the sequence is a big thing for me. Obviously, live link plays a big part, means that I get a much more handheld vibe to my camera. We use Perforce. That's another thing that's worth mentioning is source control. Now, when I did Battlesuit, I did it in the most rookiest way ever. Like, we were doing Dropbox files. I was zipping up, packaging my Unreal Engine files and send it to the other artists, and then they would tweak it and send it back, and you can imagine it's a friggin' nightmare. On Mutant Year Zero, we decided to educate ourselves a bit better. We're like, we need source control. Now, it's free. Source control, if you use something like Perforce, it's, if you're using between 3 or 5 users, it's free. You just need to pay for your Amazon server account, right? So I would say sequencer, Perforce, source control, huge thing. Like amazingly big game changer for me, because like my artist can make a change, synchronize it, I load up the level. Oh no, he's working on that level. I can't corrupt that file. So sick. And it's almost like having a virtual studio. Like on my current feature film, which is a CG anime, like we've got like 5 or 6 people working on it at the moment, and we're going to ramp up. But it doesn't feel like any disruption when someone joins a team, because they just synchronize. The entire server is downloaded, and they're away. They can go off, and I don't have that package files up. Everyone's using the same version, it's amazing. But yeah, I would say I live and breathe in the sequencer. Like, yeah, I don't go create blueprints. I mean, I understand the blueprint system, of course, because I sometimes want to go and tweak things. The other feature I do like, which I use a lot, is Niagara. So Niagara is the particle system. We were using Cascade before, but the thing about Niagara is I came from a compositing background, right? So my background was, I was a composite for many years. I used things like Shake, that's old school, and Nuke as well. Started off, and I did a lot of work in Nuke. So it's all node-based. And for me to be able to open up particles, it's like, oh, you just connect this. And that's what I love about blueprints as well. Even though I'm not technically like super savvy with blueprints, I know my way around it. And that really helps for me to experiment and try things. And that's the thing. When you're in a game engine, you're essentially, I don't want to use the word hack, but everything you do, you're essentially hacking it, right? Like I'm going into blueprints. At the moment, we've done this hack in Unreal where I want to have controls of the hands, but I didn't want to go in mocap hands. So we're actually using something called Re-illusion to create hand gestures, export it out as FBX, and then retarget just the hand to the socket of the hand here.
Wow.
And it's just a hack, but it works. Who cares? It works. And that's the thing about using a game engine. Yeah, and yes, it's not always perfect. Like, it's bound to crash. Like, I get like 3 to 4 crashes a day. So once you get your head around that you are using a game engine, it's not Unreal Engine. I mean, Unity is probably a much more polished product in terms of like it's finished, it's got the licenses, whereas Unreal is free and it's constantly being updated by these amazing team. And it's going to break. Things are going to break. Things are not going to work. Your animation may freeze up. Your blueprints may need to be revisited. If you can get your head around that and factor that as part of your day, then it's going to be a great way of making films for sure.
That's so cool.
That makes sense. Yeah, the crashes on Unreal Engine are real, but you just got to work through them.
I know. Thank God for the log report.
Yeah. Hopefully Unreal 5 fixes some things, but
fingers crossed.
From David West, I don't remember which Sizzler reel was playing when this question popped up. Maybe Mutant. Are you filming multiple scenes or creating with sequencer on a single level, or each scene is at its own level?
Very good question. Actually, I saw that on the live thing, and I'm glad someone asked that. Okay, one of the things I had to do when I dived into Unreal Engine is I had to rethink the way I make sequences and shots. Traditionally in a film, you have, when you break down the script, you have scene numbers, then you have your shots, right? And with Unreal Engine, you're essentially making a video game in a way. So I have my project, which is a big Unreal Engine file. I have my maps. Now my maps, I break them down. So when I break down my script, I break down in location. So Mutant Year Zero, I have the wasteland. I have the motorway sequence. I have the interior. These are my maps, okay? So I have interior map, motorway map, inside the ship map, and the arc, right? And then I have my scenes. Now the scene could be scene 7, scene 8, and then I have my shots. Now my scenes are the actual level itself, okay? But my shots are the sequencer files. So if I want to do scene 7, shot 2, I create a new sequencer file, scene 7, shot 2. It's all in the same level, so I don't have to re-import assets and stuff like that. Now, here's a heads up. When I first did it the first time, I didn't do it that way. I learned the hard way. I was creating multiple levels and multiple projects because my headset was so used to working in Maya or Max or the film visual effects world. And whereas in here, you got to remember you're building an entire world. You're placing the cameras, you're placing sequencer files. Each of these are actual shots that get rendered by the movie pipeline. Your assets, you import only once and you're sharing those assets. Now, one of the things I also do is I don't load a ton of stuff into the level. I load it into the sequencer file. So that means, like, for example, I have my duck character running around with a gun. And in scene 7, the duck character could be wearing one hat. In scene 8, the duck character is wearing no hat. In sequencer, I can turn stuff on and off. Once you get your head around assets, maps, levels, sequencer, it really starts to reflect how you plan your shots, how you break down the script. Like the current feature, it's amazing that my script breakdowns now feel a little bit alien when I show it to a line producer. Like, wait, what? What's a level map sequencer? What's the assets? What? Where do I expect to see this? So it's worth thinking in that way. I say sequencer are your shots. The other thing also is it's worth organizing your directories also. So again, frankly, I come from visual effects, so I learned like the really strict way of organization of structure, but you don't need to go too crazy. As long as you have a folder which has the environment, so the arc, then you have your scene 7, shot 1, scene 7, shot. Now I work in increments of like 10, 20, 30, 40, 50. So if I want to add a shot, I can add 11, 12, 13, right? So I always do 10, 20, 30, 40 as my shots. The scene numbers are the same as well, scene 10, scene 20, scene 30. Also, the scenes should be generated from your script. Don't try to make up on the fly. I tried that and you end up getting really messy and you're like, oh my God, I wish I didn't do that. Because if you've got the tradition, and this is going back to traditional filmmaking, you always break it down from the script. Saying if you're using Final Draft, there's an option that says show scene numbers. Always show scene numbers, send a PDF out and start breaking stuff out. I have a spreadsheet where I track everything. We also use something called Trello. If you guys use Trello, Trello is pretty awesome. And we use that because I don't want to send a million emails, and we use that to kind of move tasks around. But yeah.
Awesome. Perfect. I think we got time for 2 more questions. Hard. There's a few more left. So got a question from Ben here. What is the hardest thing you see people from the film world struggle with most in understanding this new technology? So I guess
well,
biggest hurdle into it.
Well, one of it was the understanding of working with scenes, maps, and levels. Understanding that you're building a world. Okay. I think the other thing is there's this technophobe element to it where I remember when I was telling my other filmmaker friends, my friends that own LA or the UK, and they're all making films and TV shows. They're like, HaZ, what are you up to? What's this thing I'm seeing you online doing? Like, what, you making a video game? I'm like, no, I'm making an animated film. They're like, what? Wait, you're doing this with DreamWorks or do you have a huge team? No, it's just me in this room and a couple of people online. They're like, what? You did that? Yeah, and they just couldn't get their head around. And when I'm like, why don't you just try it out yourself? And their biggest fear was, oh God, it's a technology. Don't we have VFX artists for that? Can I not direct a bunch of VFX artists? I'm like, you could, but you know what? It's free. Download it and trust me. The minute you start moving your camera, even if it's a frigging cube, but you're moving a camera around the cube, believe me, you'll get the butterfly feelings that, oh my God, I'm making a movie. Or, or just live link your phone or your iPad, here's a YouTube tutorial. And a few of my friends tried it. They're like, holy shit, I can see why you're buzzing about this. Whereas the others are like, they still just can't get their head around the fact that, you can make a movie in this. And I think one of the things I found when I spoke to a lot of executives, especially the executive types, is I don't even mention the video game engine. I say I'm making an animated film. Here it is. They're like, holy shit, that looks amazing. No one cares how you made it. Now, of course, in the behind the scenes and the making of, when the movie's out, you shout the hell out of it. It was done in the game engine. Now, the attractive thing I find is executives, obviously, they don't want to know the game engine thing, but they do want to know that, you're going to deliver on time and on budget. It's also the type of people you work with. Now, traditionally in visual effects, I would hire a specific compositor that's very good at live action compositing, can seamlessly roto and key and all of that stuff. I would hire the best Houdini artist for the best simulation and so on, right? What I find with the projects I'm on at the moment, I'm hiring generalists. I'm hiring people that can model, that can texture, that can light, that can animate, that are essentially good storytellers as well. And I love that. I love working with those people because then they stay on right to the end of the project. They don't just get hired for a fixed number of time they go, like you have in conventional filmmaking, right? When the visual effects process in, they stay on right throughout. So it becomes more collaborative and you have a sense of teamship, comrade. And that is one thing when I tell other filmmakers, they're like, oh, we didn't think of it that way. We just thought it's a software we have to learn. So I think that's the biggest hurdle. Learning as well, learning a tool is hard. I got to admit, when I left the visual effects industry, I thought that I would never have to touch new After Effects or C4D. I'm still doing my own motion graphics complicated because I can, and it's fun. I don't think I will ever do it. I wouldn't do a big shot, but I can. And the thing about Unreal was I didn't want to sit there and go through hours of tutorials. So what I did was I made a list. And this is what I tell everyone that is trying to learn Unreal for the first time, but they're like, I don't think I'm technically savvy or this is scary. I just say this, make a list of things you want to do. So in my case, what I did was, and I learned this over a weekend, by the way, I made a list and say, okay, I want to know how to import an asset, okay? I want to know, well, first how to load up Unreal, but then how to import an asset from the marketplace. how do I bring a camera in? How do I keyframe a camera? And how do I watch that? That was done in like an hour. I'm like, oh, okay, cool. How do I put some lights in there? Okay, put some lights in there. And how do I render this out as a QuickTime or something so I can put it in Resolve and start editing? And that's another couple of hours. And within a couple of hours, I had a scene of like 5 shots of just someone walking around a box and some cameras. But that was enough for me to go, oh, okay, I'm doing it now. Now I want to know more. How do I put particles? How do I get better shape? What's this RTX thing all about? Oh, this is cool. Render times crank up. All of this stuff, you just start, and that's the best way to learn something like that, is an incremental, iterative way. And it's kind of like ironic because it's kind of how you play a video game, right? You level up, right? And that's how I do the learning on Unreal. You just level up.
Yeah, I feel like with a lot of software, and different editing software, especially something like After Effects, it's just kind of choosing a task, accomplishing that task, and then moving on, and then eventually you do skill set, right?
Totally.
You gotta dive in. Okay, last question here. This is from us, but basically what you just answered as kind of like a hurdle for, let's say, filmmakers or people who are trying to learn Unreal or virtual production. That's fantastic in terms of kind of task orientated, but overarching as a whole, the industry, obviously this past year has been very exciting for virtual production. A lot of it due to The Mandalorian, and a lot of it, I feel like a lot of people have been stuck at home during COVID and just have time to just do stuff that they've never had time to do before. We're at the tipping point of virtual production. What's the barrier to entry? Like what's going to push over the edge?
I think, yeah, no, absolutely. I think the thing that people got to remember though, as with every new technology, there's a huge cost involved. Like, to do The Mandalorian is friggin' expensive, like to rent those screens out. So I think that's something worth thinking about before embarking on virtual production. I mean, the cool thing is anyone could try out virtual production at home, using the tool sets or set up a virtual set, or even I've seen people on like getting LED monitors on their desk and just getting miniatures, and it's great. You can do that. It's amazing. But there's a huge cost. And I think the big thing is if you're a producer and you are trying to like get a movie made, I think it's worth remembering, don't just get virtual production just to do a couple of scenes. You are having to rent it for the week. So you may as well get as many shots as possible. Like if you can, up to 80% of your movie should be done in virtual production, or elements of it, to justify the cost. Okay. And I think that's a big thing. So the expense is a big thing. But the other thing also is, one thing I always say is there's a lot of companies now out there setting up virtual production screens, and they invite filmmakers. That's how we did Percival, by the way. Percival was basically, it was a day where these screen companies called Universal Pixel and Satori wanted to bring some tech in to showcase to Netflix and Amazon. And I was working at a company called Rebellion, and I was like, well, I want to play with this. And we're like, okay, let's make a short film. So I would say any filmmaker that wants to try the LED screens but don't want to or can't afford to pay like 300 grand a week or something, reach out to those companies. Say, listen, I'm a filmmaker. I want to try these screens out to assess it for my next film, but also I just want to understand how it works. And you'll find most of these companies, they haven't really got a lot of jobs coming in yet because they're still bidding on the jobs or pitching. They're like, yeah, come in, try it out, and use every second of that to like try things out and put it in your reel, and then you go and pitch it to other people. I think that's where we're at. But in terms of like the tipping point, like I think we're at a point now where, here's the difference between where we are now to where it was like back in the day in live action. Back in the day in live action, everything was very close knit, right? You had to know someone that knows someone that knows someone to like get an Arri Alexa camera, right? Or everything was kind of close guarded. People weren't sharing stuff. I would say 99.8% of my education of virtual production came from online. The community on Facebook. There's a Facebook group called Virtual Production. Amazing. Like, it's people from ILM on there. I'm on there. People from all sorts are on there. But everyone is sharing stuff. Like, people go, oh, I can't get my Vive tracker to synchronize with Unreal. What am I doing? I'm sure I'm doing something silly. And it's like, there you go. That's what we did. They filmed a video. It's so liberating that everyone's like in it together. Maybe it's a pandemic thing that's kind of brought people together because everyone's at home. But I find that I don't think virtual production is a gimmick. Like you had with 3D stereo, it was like kind of like a one-off thing. I think you find that once, fingers crossed, the COVID situation kind of de-escalates, you're going to find virtual production is going to constantly be used constantly. So I would say, if you don't have access to an LED screen, get your phone, get your iPad, live link it, start getting understanding how 3D space works. That's the way to work. Yeah.
Awesome. That's a great answer. And point out too, for all the questions that didn't get answered, we apologize. Pointed out that any unanswered question will be sent over to HaZ so he can.
Please.
We're gonna punish you some more, HaZ. So thanks, man. Like there are so many nuggets in there, dude. Like and so practical. Like I love. I mean, Winnipeg is a smaller market, right? We don't have access to a volume yet, but like just all the practical tips, and like 100% agree with your points about learning the software as someone who's trying to learn Unreal and try and like get my head into this space. It is a really overwhelming task at first, but when you compartmentalize it like that, it's doable. Yeah. So
For sure.
Austin, Reed, thank you so much for handling the Q&A. We
Thanks,
certainly
guys.
appreciate it. And thanks everyone for joining us tonight. HaZ, I do want to talk to you about Hellboy 2. That is one of my favorite movies, and I saw that on your reel, so that's a topic for later. We hope everyone has a fun night. What's left of it, please check out Insert Coin and the director's Q&A that's going to accompany it on March 31st. We have loads of new stuff coming up as well, so check out the New Media Manitoba website. Happy Tech Week, everyone. Have a great night.